But none of them employ a whole slew of massive racists like you.
This country would be nothing without our rich history of immigration.
Everybody ignored me, everyone laughed at me, but here we are, 4,000 votes later.
You're not at all answering her question. Her question is about a shortage of medicine.
We now are free from the European Medicines Agency. If the NHS is failing to do that, that's on them, not Brexit.
Listening to you, it feels full of fear. Does that bother you?
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we are going to be watching Nigel Farage at a BBC Question Time getting absolutely set up and hounded by an audience of liberals. The audience that they've assembled here is an almost unbelievable level of bias, and it clearly does not represent the view of the people in England. And this is a hit job designed to make Nigel Farage look very unpopular, but I don't think it'll work. Let's get into it.
Hello. I'd like to know, what is it about you and your party that attracts racists and extremists, whether you say you want them or not?
Well, I've done more. I've done more to drive the far right out of British politics than anybody else alive. I took on the BNP just over a decade ago. I said to their voters, if this is a protest vote, but you don't support their racist agenda, don't vote for them, vote for me. And we destroyed them. I've never allowed, in parties I've led, anybody who was even a member of an extremist organisation to join our parties. What happened over the last weekend was truly astonishing. A tirade of invective abuse directed at the Prime Minister. I mean, the whole thing was unbelievable. It didn't ring true. So I checked it out. It turns out the man that did this is an actor. He was contacted by the Telegraph this morning. He denied he was an actor. We then found out, yes, actually, he is an actor. He's worked in the past for Channel 4. On his own site, he says, I'm a well-spoken actor with an alter ego. I do rough talking. Let me tell you, from the minute he turned up in that office in Clacton and I saw him, he was acting from the very start. He even says on his website, hire me, I do undercover filming.
Should we Nigel, shall I just explain?
Let me finish.
No, just in case people aren't totally familiar with what you're talking about.
These are the comments, and Rishi Sunak's reacted to them today.
Sure.
This is a total and utter set-up that has been leapt on, of course, by our political opponents, leapt on by most of mainstream.
All right, let me just explain it for those who might not have seen the Channel 4 report. So let me just explain. Well, I expect you have, but just in case there's anyone home who hasn't seen it, so there's a report on Channel 4 where a man saying he was a canvasser for you said some absolutely extraordinarily racist comments. What you are saying now is that he's an actor. And that it's a set-up, effectively. I can just say, Channel 4 say, we strongly stand by our journalism. Well, I have to put their point of view. They're not here to answer. We met the man, Mr. Parker, for the first time at Reform UK. Hang on, I have to put their right to reply, as I would have to put yours. We met Mr. Parker for the first time at Reform UK party headquarters, where he was a Reform Party canvasser. They say they didn't pay him, they didn't know him, and that he was filmed covertly. So if it was a setup, when you're saying it was, very clear, you've been saying that all day, who set it up? Are you saying that Channel 4 paid this guy? They're denying it. Paid this guy to set you up?
Channel 4 used a production company, which of course gives them deniability. What I have no doubt about is this guy was in his alter ego. I've even found now on TikTok this guy doing sort of Alf Garnett type stuff. This was a comedy act, but it was designed to hurt us, and sadly, some people believe it. And let me promise you.
So who do you think would have done this, Nigel Farage?
I want nothing to do with people like him, and he has nothing to do with us. He's somebody who turned up, we didn't know who he was, and by sheer coincidence, he happened to get teamed up with Channel 4, who we'd worked for in the past. I'm sorry.
I mean, I know some of my friends, they have start-up companies, but none of them employ a whole slew of massive racists like you. So, I credited you with more intelligence than to say it's an actor. And what I want, I'm not an actor myself, but I want to defend actors. Not all actors are racist, but, you know, probably the only actors who are racist are the actors in your party, the Reform Party.
Hang on a second. The Labour candidate, but we're talking about Clacton here, the Labour candidate in Clacton has made some deeply offensive, racist remarks, so much so that Keir Starmer has banished him from the constituency and said go to the Midlands. So you get people in all parties saying wrong things and bad things. Wherever I find it, I always drive it out. I've done that all my career.
Well, they're still standing, but from what I understand, you're going to stop them standing for reform anyway from now on. Yes, a woman in the red and black top there.
I just want to know, when are you actually going to take responsibility of your actions and say sorry and stop making excuses?
I'm not going to apologise. I'm not going to apologise for what, and we'll find out the full truth. But I promise you, what happened over the weekend, what was on the front page of the Times today, is a set-up, a deliberate attempt to smear us. It's almost, when you look at it, what he said is almost unbelievable. A constant stream of invective. And he does this for a living, he does it professionally, and he came along in his alter ego and did it. It's wrong.
It's not a million miles from what these candidates are reporting said.
It is
the woman with the blonde hair here.
Nigel Farage, I just have a question about being a paid actor. You also run you are online on a website called Cameo, where you'll record paid shorts of you doing roasts or pep talks for people. I was just wondering, your cheapest ones you do are £70. If I paid you £70 now, would you admit that this country would be nothing without our rich history of immigration?
Well, I tell you what. And this is what's gone wrong. Because you talk about immigration, and it ran from after the war up until the millennium at net 30 to 40,000 a year. And yes, it worked. In fact, we had the most successful immigration policies of any country in the whole of Europe. No question. Now, it is so totally out of control. Just think about this. 2.5 million people have come in the last 2 years. You wonder why you can't get a house. You wonder why your rents have gone up 25% in 4 years. You wonder why our infrastructure is struggling. You wonder why, we have to build a new house every 2 minutes just to cope with the numbers. And that's the issue. It's now running at numbers that are literally unimaginable and are diminishing the quality of life of everybody in this country. And frankly, this should be the biggest issue of this election.
OK. So many of you asked about this topic. I'm just going to go take a couple more and then I'll move on. Man in the blue and white check shirt.
I've just listened to you talk about how the establishment are against you and how everything's a conspiracy theory. Why can't you accept that it's your violent, racist rhetoric that's causing this, and it's not an establishment that's against you?
I'm sorry, that is unfair and wrong in every single way. I just talked there a moment ago about the immigration problem, which is numbers. I talked a moment ago about Zia Youssef, a practising Muslim in Britain who's the biggest donor to our party in this campaign. I talked about my previous history of really helping to close down the BNP. I don't accept, sir, what you've just said for one moment.
OK, let's just one more point. The man in the shirt just behind you, yeah.
OK, so just a scummy act by the BBC. They've obviously assembled the most left-wing audience that they can possibly find in order to try and make it look like Nigel Farage is really unpopular. And it's just typical of them and reminds me of an old video that we've actually covered on this channel when Tommy Robinson was ambushed one night on the BBC.
Do the panel think it would be a good idea to take Tommy Robinson and Anjum Chowdhury and put them on some kind of island and bomb it with anthrax?
We're delighted he took the opportunity to come today and show how unrepresentative and out of touch he is.
Yeah.
By an extremely hostile audience, and they went for his jugular. So this is the kind of thing that the BBC do when they want to maximise reputation destruction and make it look like somebody is an extremist or somebody is so hated and unpopular. And I actually interviewed Tommy recently and I spoke to him about that very night. And here's what he had to say. You saw the video that I covered of you, I think it was like 10 years ago or so, when there was a question time happening and you were in the audience. I've never seen a dog pile like that in my life. Right? And people were just taking their chance to take pot shots at you. And it's like...
Do you know the man behind me, the Muslim counsellor?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, he's now been prosecuted and he's in jail for sexual harassment of women, yeah?
You're the biggest fascist in this country. Yes, you are. I'm not fascist because you say so. You're an Islamophobe. You're an Islamophobe and you hate Muslims.
I don't hate Muslims.
And do you know what?
The other dude, the other Muslim who was a convert who said we should put me on an island and bomb me with anthrax and got a whole cheering celebration.
I can't believe that. You can't believe that. Somebody says that they should put you on and bomb you with anthrax.
And everyone celebrated. Yeah. Everyone cheered. Do you know when I went into that studio? And this is where they mess up as well. And I think that I went in and they sat me in the audience. They invited me to the show and then put me in the audience. Didn't put me on the panel. Put me in the audience. Yeah? So I'm sitting in the audience and then I knew how it was going to go. Yeah? And everyone's attacking me. And as I walk off, the producer goes, "How did that go?" And I said, "Exactly how I fucking wanted it to, mate." Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I walked through Luton Town Centre, which is my hometown. And the woman who runs the Jack and Potato van, she went, I was screaming at the TV. And what they don't realise is the British public don't like bullying anyway, yeah? They don't like a bully. What they done that day was attempt to bully me in mass numbers. They didn't put anyone fair or representative. They had an audience ready to attack, a panel ready to attack on issues I wasn't talking about, like a Carla who likes to sound like he swallowed a dictionary, yeah? Without making many points.
Yeah.
But he kept making points about race. And it's like, I've never spoke about race. My problem is an ideology. It's Islam.
No one's prepared to explain what I've said as bigotry or racist.
1 second. For those who don't know, Baghdad was the intellectual, cultural centre of mathematics and art and science about 1,000 years ago for quite a long time. No one blames Islam for that. So negative people who happen to be Muslim, yes, of course, it's your religion that causes it. But if you pioneer mathematics and science and introduce algebra into Europe and the guitar and coffees and lemons, that's not because you're Muslim.
Everything I spoke about that day has aged pretty well for me and terribly for them. We saw Saira Khan. Saira Khan kept saying, "You're a bigot, you're a racist." I said, "How?"
You are racist.
You've got
and
nothing
you
to
don't
back up,
like
darling.
that, do you?
Tommy, let a Carla speak.
You're getting
What
really
have I
heated
said that's
up.
racist?
You are a racist.
What have I said that's
bigot.
racist?
And she made a point because I started showing her death threats that I've received, yeah? And incitement to murder, kill my family. And she said, "Well, I don't get death threats because I'm not a bigot," yeah? And then I think I ended that on, "Try and talk about Islam and you will." And then 10 years later, she attempted to speak and she wore a bikini and she attempted to speak about Islamic extremism. And guess what? She got death threats and she sat on the TV talking about this one death threat and how terrible it is. But people like her are the reason. Those people in that audience and her and the entire panel, they are the reason that the British public have been intimidated into fear and the average person is scared to speak their mind because of these false labels and this attack of "you're a racist, you're an extremist," without any evidence to it, just beating you down. And then she sits and plays that game and slanders people, dehumanises them, and then wants to sit on the TV and reap the reward for daring to talk about what we were trying to talk about 10 years ago.
So if you guys want to watch that full interview, you can check that out. I'll leave that in the end screen and also down below. But that aged horribly for the BBC, as Tommy alluded to, and it aged like fine wine for Tommy, because he's been largely vindicated in his diagnosis of the problem with multiculturalism in Britain. I mean, England is having a major demographic issue right now that is causing some very intense civil unrest. And this is why Brits are looking to Nigel Farage, because Labour and the Tories have failed them. And this video, mark my words, will age just as badly for the BBC, because this issue is not slowing down. This is only going to become more intense, and I think that Nigel Farage's run for Prime Minister might shock a few people. And also, Nigel Farage is not some sort of far right-wing extremist like they're painting him to be. And I did a video recently about Nigel Farage, and one of you guys pointed out correctly in the comments that I was actually wrong to call him a conservative. Nigel Farage is more like a classical liberal. He's great on the issue of immigration, national identity, and national sovereignty, and he highlights some very important things there. But if the left think that he is the far-right monster that they have nightmares about every single night, then they've got another thing coming. They've got no idea the kind of based Chad that might be coming through the ranks to run for PM in the next few decades if this continues. So let's get into the next bit, guys. But before we get there, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Even if you are subscribed, YouTube keeps on unsubscribing people from my channel. I don't know why. Anyways, let's get into it.
You said within the last 2 years. My wife is a non-UK national from Nepal. She came to the UK within the last 2 years. Are you saying people like her are not welcome anymore?
What I'm saying is we cannot have limitless numbers of people coming into Britain. It is making us poorer. It is diminishing our quality of life. We need to get back to where we were, where we had a sensible policy, where people came to us from friendly countries all over the world, and it was a success. We cannot go on with net migration running at 750,000 a year, despite, by the way, the Conservatives promising in 4 consecutive manifestos to reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year. And the funny thing is that Keir Starmer on his 6 priorities, doesn't even talk about this issue, simply doesn't seem to care. And I think people are joining up the dots that actually the overcrowded country we're living in is not working.
OK, now we've got a question related to that, but before we do, I just have to say, yet again, because we are in an election period, and I have mentioned some particular constituencies, that a full list of candidates for those constituencies is available on the BBC website. Dee Williams, let's hear from you. Yeah.
Good evening, Nigel.
Hello.
Your core pledge concerning illegal migration states that migrants in small boats could be returned to France. How will you achieve this?
Well, we have something called the Royal Marines, if it comes to it. But you know what? We won't need to do that. I was the first person 4 years ago going out into the Channel, filming this, saying there was a massive problem coming down the tracks. Everybody ignored me. Everyone laughed at me. But here we are, 4,000 boats later, 128,000 people later, 91% of them men, mostly young men.
So Dee is asking very specifically, how will this be? How will you return people from boats to France?
We cannot, well, we won't do any of this. We won't deport anyone to Rwanda. We won't solve the problem in any way at all until we leave a meddling court in Strasbourg that has gone way beyond its powers. We have to leave...
You're talking about the European Court of Human Rights.
We have to leave the European Court of Human Rights, get back our own sovereignty, declare that anyone comes via this route will not get refugee status. And if that doesn't work, we'll pick them up in the Channel and take them back. And by the way, we've given the French £500 million. They should not, under the international law of the sea, have their navy escorting boats to our 12-mile line. We did a tough negotiation with the French as well. The other parties literally have nothing to say about this, because when we did try and send a plane to Rwanda, it was actually on the runway when the court intervened.
If you're returning these small boats to France, surely it's going to be willing ports that are going to accept these small boats back. How is that going to achieve? Well, where are these willing ports?
Well, the Australians towed the boats back to Indonesia 12 years ago, and that ended the problem.
But the Australians had a deal. I think what Dee is getting at is France... you know, I'm no diplomat for France, but France is unlikely to take kindly, as you said yourself, to the idea that you come along and you get the migrants into a boat, you then go back over to France, I don't know if you've got a landing craft or something, and then you make them... No, hang on, let's just... The practicalities, I think that's what Dee's asking. And then they step out onto the sand, or onto... What happens at that moment? Do you think the French are just going to take
they've come from the sand. But here's the point.
No, but do you think... How is that going to work? No, do you think the French will just accept it?
If they know they can't stay, they won't come. And it's interesting to think, in the last year of the Labour government, they deported 47,000 people who'd come here illegally.
OK, but they won't stay if they won't come if they can't stay. Dee's asking very specifically, how will it work? So your plan...
I'm telling you,
to them in small... Hang on, to put them... I'm just repeating your words, to put them in small boats and take them back to France.
No, I said...
How is that practically going to happen?
I said, we leave the ECHR, we declare that no one that comes via this route gets refugee status. And by the way, we've given 500,000 people refugee status since 2016. We're very, very generous. And we deport anybody that's here illegally, as we used to, under Labour and Tory governments. No more boats will come.
But how will you get the countries to accept them?
If they do, we get the Royal Marines to take them back to the beaches from which they took off. I hope it doesn't come to that, but if it does, that's what we have to do. And very interesting that Keir Starmer echoed my words the other night in the debate. He said it's a national security emergency. Well, boy, he is right, because these are young men coming from countries plagued by terrorism, plagued by gang culture. Many of them have fought in wars, and coming from countries that don't even treat women as second-class citizens. It's a very, very serious situation.
I'm still not entirely... have we had an answer to your question, do you feel?
Not exactly, no. I've just got this vision of, like, the D-Day landings in reverse, and we're sort of offloading all these poor people onto the sands of Omar Beach.
All right, OK. Well, let's...
Yes, that is what's happening now, except the Brits are not storming the beaches of Normandy. What's really happening is that immigrants are storming the beaches of Dover. And Nigel Farage is going to do something very friendly by offering them a free ride with the Royal Marines back to the shores that they came from. That's a very nice thing to do. Just imagine that someone walked into your front door in your home, kicked their feet up on your couch, started eating your food, watching your TV, and then you gave them a nice piggyback ride back to the sidewalk. I mean, it's a lot better treatment than you'd be likely to receive in many other countries around the world if you invaded them, because that's what this is. It's an invasion. Lots of uninvited young men rocking up on your shores in large numbers. And then you've got these people in the audience who are just so brainwashed that they sit there and cry with indignation that this guy actually wants to patrol your borders and protect your shores. Heaven forbid. But understand that I don't live in the UK, even though I did live in London for a few years and I am a citizen of the UK. I do have the passport. I was there in May for a month and I was doing podcasts and I was talking to people, whether that be political commentators or public figures or even just people in the street. And I was seeing the state of the cities, and I think it's very clear to me that this whole leftist rhetoric where they wield the word racism as a political weapon to bash people who have a sense of national identity over the head with is not very popular. And it is becoming less and less popular. And this is even happening with Zoomers and millennials who are realizing that the cards are really stacked against them. And there's a very interesting clip that's been going around on Twitter of a guy named Aaron Bastani, who's a pretty well-known leftist, walking around the streets and asking young people who they're going to vote for in the coming election.
England's England. And sometimes I don't even want to be here.
Why's that? Bad. Well, it's getting worse.
Too many bloody foreigners. You look around, there's a foreigner. No more England. Might as well name it something else. Hell.
Hell? Why hell?
There's too many foreigners.
We spend too much tax money on immigrants, and I think that's a joke. And we should worry about our own people before others.
Do you think the political class generally are doing that then?
No.
But we've got a young guy, mixed heritage, who's saying Reform UK. So what are those people wrong about? What attracts you to Reform UK?
Reform UK is that, like, if you're an actual English citizen, you actually have a voice in what happens in this country.
We were talking to some young boys over there a moment ago, and they really surprised me because they said they were into Reform UK.
Yeah, that's what everyone's been saying. Everyone around Chai has been saying that they're like Reform UK, they're very into it. I haven't really heard many people talking about Labour. It's mainly just been Reform UK, like people, you know, like 15, 16 and everything, just been talking.
That will surprise many people.
Yeah.
That's kind of strange, because most people think Reform voters, older, homeowners, blokes in their 50s and 60s, just saying it's kids in Chichester. Sorry, kids. Young adults in Chichester.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of people that are just, if you ask anyone around here, like 15, 16, maybe even young, they'll all just say, like, it's all about Reform UK.
So with the rise of social media, young people are becoming more politically conscious and politically minded. And Nigel Farage is all the hype at the moment, which is why the BBC are doing these hit pieces on him and making it seem like if you vote for Nigel Farage, you're a right-wing extremist. That's not working. And that's because nobody trusts the media anymore. On to the last part.
I'm a doctor in the NHS. My parents and myself were migrants to this country. You've said that the reason that there's waiting lists for the NHS, there's not enough houses, there's not enough, the cost of living's too high, is because of migrants. But since Brexit, there's been shortages of critical medications in the NHS, from what I understand, because of supply chain issues, such as IV paracetamol and other medications that help people not die. As someone that we have to thank for Brexit, what would you propose that we should do about this?
Well, what I blame for problems in the NHS, I wasn't blaming migrants, I was blaming the population explosion, you know? I mean, we've had a 10 million increase in the British population since 1997, a 6 million increase since 2010, when the Conservatives were elected.
There's not enough of certain types of medications.
In terms of medication...
Is because too many people are using them. Is that what you're saying?
The reason we have a waiting list...
No, she's asking... She's asking specifically about the difficulty... No, you're asking very specifically, because you mentioned paracetamol and ibuprofen.
Well, here's the point.
Well, just so we're clear what the question is...
And it's not just paracetamol and ibuprofen, it's medications that are critical to keep people alive.
And you're saying, in your experience, that Brexit is either wholly or partly the reason why it's harder to get those medications.
I do remember being told before the vote that we get all sorts of diseases if we voted Brexit, but here's the point. Freed from the European Medicines Agency, and thank goodness we are. And if as a doctor you believed in the vaccine rollout, of course, you'll have noticed, and there are questions about it, but you'll have noticed our vaccine rollout was way ahead of Europe. Why? We left the European Union.
Nigel, in fairness, you are not at all answering her question. Her question is about a shortage of medicine.
We now are free from the European Medicines Agency to run our own procurement policy, which means we can buy whatever drugs we need from anywhere in the world without having to get them registered.
It's not working.
Well, if it's not working, it's rather like, back to the earlier point, we are now free. We're in charge. We can buy drugs from anywhere in the world. If the NHS is failing to do that, that's on them, not Brexit.
Man here in the black T-shirt.
How much better off are you because of the taxes you don't have to pay through the UK leaving the European Union?
I'm not. No, the opposite. You're all poorer because the tax burden for working people is now the highest since 1948. And this is the trickery. I mentioned earlier about staff nurses. 40p tax was the top rate of tax in this country, right? From the mid-80s right through to the end of Tony Blair's time. And 1.5 million people paid that top rate of tax. Because of sleight of hand and freezing allowances, by the end of 2027, it'll be 8 million people paying that level of tax. Fascinatingly, both Labour and Conservatives agree they're going to keep the tax bands frozen. You will all be paying more tax under the next government, whether it's Labour or whether it's Conservative.
One now.
We heard from the Green Party before you, and to me they felt full of hope. Listening to you, it feels full of fear. Does that bother you, that you give an atmosphere of fear and perhaps people vote for you because they're worried about what will happen?
I want to help the poorest in society, lift them out of society, get people off benefits, which won't just help them economically, but psychologically too. I want to get a grip on the population explosion so that for the NHS and others we can start to catch up. I want our young people, our small businesses to be freed from regulation, to become more profitable. Actually, what I'm offering is, and look, we know Labour are going to win, right? We've known from the start Labour will win. What I'm offering is a platform to campaign on for the next 5 years. It is positive, it is optimistic, it is about building a better Britain, but recognising that right now it's broken and the two leading parties offer no solutions at all.
So Britain is in a whole world of trouble at the moment. They're not doing well economically. They're very divided. They don't have a strong sense of national identity or national pride. The political situation is an absolute joke, and it's left much of the population totally demoralised and disenfranchised, and there's no easy fix for this. And I think Brexit, led by Nigel Farage, will be a good thing in the future. Just like I think that Trump is a really good president. But the similarity there is that when you have the weight of the establishment stacked up against you and you have to cut through so much bureaucracy to get anything done, and people are just constantly putting hurdles in your way, then actually having your vision come to fruition becomes nearly impossible. There is just so much beneath the surface that needs to be addressed if there is any hope of order. If there is even a slither of hope for Britain to become the sovereign powerhouse that it should be, then there needs to be a renewed sense of national identity. And the British people need to be proud to be British again. And they need to have a desire to protect that identity. And if the self-flagellation and the cultural masochism continues, then they're done. And that is a real tragedy. So guys, as per usual, you can find my links below. Social media's reality-based podcast. You can check out my Tommy Robinson interview, which is just heavily censored, by the way. So check it out while you can. And if you guys would like to subscribe to the channel here, if you'd like to watch another video, right here. Next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.